So the way I'm going to go about this, I thought about this a bit ahead of the webinar today, and you know, there's a whole bunch of things. I realize that there's kind of a whole bunch of things that when you're building something in GCP, and those of you who have done GCP before and actually built something in GCP will kind of know what I'm talking about. There are all these kinds of little setup tasks along the way that you sometimes have to do. You have to enable certain APIs sometimes. You have to grant permissions to a user account or a service account. And I thought of, on the one hand, I could take the approach of like doing all of that ahead of time and making the demo like very smooth and like faster, or I could kind of try to do it from the perspective of someone who is starting from zero, not necessarily zero from the perspective of being a beginner, but like in a new environment. And so we can talk through and you can see the necessary setup steps, because those are some of the things that really trip people up, right? Like you try to deploy something and then you don't have the permissions that you need, or you don't have the APIs enabled, or you thought you had the APIs enabled, but really, one API is kind of dependent on another one in the background. So I'm going to create a new project, and we are going to do this kind of from scratch. What we're going to do here is I'm literally just going to create a new project. So this is actually an old Google Cloud account slash environment that I used a while ago before I created my own domain for GCP Study Hub. And I hit the maximum number of projects with my GCP Study Hub domain or organization that I set up, because I have those available for folks to use for the labs, for the hands-on labs on GCP Study Hub. So I'm going to use this old account that doesn't have any domain associated with it, and it just has a few projects in it. So I have not hit my limit on the number of projects I can create. I'm going to create a new project. We are going to call this my CSV ingestion project. You can see that the project ID here has been generated for us, my CSV ingestion, project. And I can, edit this if I want. But, those of you who have taken a course already on my platform, or who have used GCP before, probably know that the project name can be changed at any time. It's just a display name for your project, whereas the project ID is immutable. Once you set it, you cannot change it. And it's in no organization, because we don't have an organization for this, for the purposes of this. So it's creating the project. And we want to go to that project now. So when you click up here, you can pull up all the different projects that you have access to. And if you have different organizations, those would also show up here. So kind of a little bit of a view into your resource hierarchy. I'm going to select the CSV ingestion project that I just created. And now what I'm going to do is a very boring but very necessary step of enabling the APIs that we need for this project. So if we talk through the project a little bit, we have essentially what the solution is going to be is we're going to have an ingestion pipeline where a CSV file, this CSV file, which is just customer data. Okay, I just made this dummy customer file. Customer ID, first name, last name, email, age, country, type of account, when they signed up, and how much they've spent. This is fake data, but this is the kind of table that you could very realistically work with at a company or an organization, right? So we're going to take a CSV like this. It's going to be uploaded to a Google Cloud storage bucket, and that action, that event of uploading the bucket, the file to the bucket, will trigger a Cloud function which grabs that file and puts it into BigQuery, right? And so there are many ways to ingest data into BigQuery, but the convenience of this is that it's event driven. So you don't necessarily have to have this process running all the time. You don't necessarily have to have it checking for data all the time. If you have a system that can send data over to a cloud storage bucket, um, then you don't necessarily have to be, constantly checking for that data. The way that cloud functions can be triggered is actually by events or actions within cloud storage buckets themselves, including the creation of a new object within a bucket, which is what we're going to be doing. So this is kind of how this was in a different project that I did this with previously. And this is exactly what we're going to do. We're going to upload the file to the bucket, and it's going to trigger a cloud function. But we haven't done that. We haven't set this up yet in the project that we are working this with for the sake of this demo. All right. So if we think about everything that we need to enable for this, we need to definitely enable the BigQuery API, right? So we're going to go to APIs and services. The BigQuery API is already enabled. We can see it listed there. We also need to enable the Cloud Functions API. Again, this is the stuff that's not sexy, but that when you use GCP, you will realize you have to think about, right? So we're enabling the Cloud Functions API. That will take a second. We are going to enable the Cloud Build API. This may be enabled already. No, it's not enabled, so we're going to enable it for this project as well. That will take a second to enable. We need to enable the Cloud Run Admin API. So just to kind of make sure you understand this, so the BigQuery API is obviously necessary in order to create the data set where the CSV data is gonna live, and then also do the actual loading of the CSV data into BigQuery tables. The Cloud Functions API is gonna actually be to create and deploy the function, the serverless function that we're gonna be creating. The Cloud Build API actually builds the function in the background. The Cloud Run Admin API is what's necessary for the second generation functions to run on Cloud Run infrastructure. This is the new type of cloud function. So that's what we're enabling now. And then we're going to enable the Eventarc API, which is kind of the newer way that that cloud functions are triggered. It's this service called Eventarc. This used to not be a thing, but slowly Eventarc events have become a ubiquitous tool throughout Google Cloud, and now they are the way that cloud functions are triggered, and they're super convenient, but they kind of count as their own service now, an API now. So we're going to enable that, and then we need to make sure that the cloud storage API is enabled. So I'm doing all this ahead of time because I went through this. I listed all the APIs that needed to be enabled. You won't always know which APIs need to be enabled ahead of time. It is a skill to really think about that ahead of time and be able to predict. But oftentimes, and this is why we have different environments, including pre-deployment and dev environments and testing environments, that's where you figure this stuff out. You try to build it, you deploy it, and then you realize that you didn't enable all of the APIs. So, but we're doing this ahead of time because I've done that testing already. Okay, so we've got all of our APIs enabled, and so now we're going to go back to the Center Console, and we're going to go to BigQuery, where we're going to create the data set for the data to live eventually. All right, so we're going to click here to create a data set. And I'm just going to call this CSV ingestion demo. Data location, I'm going to make this US Central 1. I live on the East Coast in the United States. This could be, I could do US East 4 or something like that. If you live in Europe, you could do, Belgium or Germany or something. Um, I mean, they have, different regions all over. But US Central 1 is what I'm going to choose. And that's going to be important because later on, the other resources that I create, I'm going to want to create in the same region for cost and latency purposes. That kind of doesn't matter when the project is so small, like the one that we're doing today. But you want to get in the habit of thinking about those things. And this is the kind of thing that also could be tested on the exam. Um, so everything else we're going to keep default here. Again, this is not a complicated use case. I don't need to worry about encryption keys. I don't need to worry about table expiration or these kinds of things. I'm going to just go ahead and create the data set. Now we can see here that we've got our data set created, but of course there are no tables in the data set because we have to upload the data. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to cloud storage, and we are going to create a bucket, and I'm going to call this CSV. Let's see, CSV ingestion bucket GCP study hub 01. Now I'm going to put this in US Central 1 because that's where my data set in BigQuery is also created. And so that will ensure the lowest latency and least amount of cost as the data is traveling. And we're going to keep it to standard storage class. We don't need nearline or cold line or archive. This is not being stored for a long period of time. And we don't want a lot of data retrieval costs in case this is like a big, data set. Again, everything else we're going to keep the same. We are going to prevent public access. So this basically means that the public internet can't access the data. And we are going to take off the soft delete policy actually, because I'm going to delete all the resources after I'm done with this. And I don't, the soft delete policy is in case you need to retrieve your, it's like retrieving your data, being able to retrieve your data after you've deleted it for some time. So I'm going to go ahead and create the bucket. Yes, I'm confirming that I want public access to be prevented. And now the bucket has been created. Okay, but we don't have any data in there. We're not going to upload the data yet. I am going to now create the cloud function. So we're going to go to cloud run functions here. So technically, we're in cloud run, and we can either deploy a web service in cloud run, or we can deploy a function, a cloud run function, right? And really all along, cloud functions were just like little containers running on cloud run. But Google just kind of abstracted the use of cloud run away. But now they're kind of being honest about the fact that cloud run is really what runs cloud functions. And you can see when we open up running a cloud function, there are more options that kind of blur the line between cloud run and cloud functions, which makes sense now why they're calling it cloud run functions. So we're going to click on a Python function, and here you go. So, there are multiple options here. These first two are almost as if you are deploying something to cloud run. You're deploying a container image, but we're not going to do that. We're going to do an inline editor to create a function, and you'll be able to see the code step by step and how it works. So we're going to call this CSV ingest function. And again, I am going to use US Central 1. This will be recorded, by the way, so you guys, can access the recording. You don't have to be taking notes or something. You can just kind of follow along and relax. And then for authentication, We are going to require authentication, um, and this is an important security step. But importantly, we are not going to restrict the traffic to only internal traffic, because that would mean that only resources within a cloud VPC, our cloud VPC, can access it, and that that is not what we want. So there's kind of the authentication, authorization, security step, and then there's the networking security step, and we're going to do the authentication security step, but not the networking security step. We're not going to worry about controlling ingress. I hope that makes sense. We are going to leave everything here as it is. We don't need a lot of memory. We don't need auto scaling. Everything else can be the same. The request timeout, 300 seconds is more than enough for what we're doing. Maybe into future projects, we will get into use cases where you want to think about those things. And we can just leave this as default as well. This chooses between the first generation Cloud Function and the second generation Cloud Function. More often than not, Cloud Run will automatically choose the second generation, and that is what's going to happen here, as you'll see. But sometimes, you just want first generation, or people are more comfortable or used to the old version of Cloud Functions. Okay, so we're going to create this. And once this runs, we are going to create a trigger here. And this is where we're going to create the Eventarc trigger. So here we go. So Eventarc trigger. Now, I could have done that as part of the setup, but I wanted to kind of do it separately. So the Eventarc trigger here is going to be cloud storage, and there are a bunch of different event types here. We are going to use google.cloud.storage.object.v1.finalized, and this basically just means like an object has been created successfully in the bucket, and that is the event that we want to trigger our Cloud Function. We're going to select the bucket that we created. As you can see, it shows up in the list. We're going to select that one, and then we are going to grant these warnings here. So this is so pub sub. It says pub sub needs this role, the service account token creator role, granted to this service account, which is a Google managed service account that it uses for pub sub, and pub sub is actually what in the back end triggers Eventarc, or Eventarc uses to trigger the Cloud Function. So we're going to grant that the service account that is going to be used to run the Cloud Function itself is the default compute engine service account. And so we're going to keep that. And we also need to grant these other ones in order to receive the events. So again, that is the kind of thing that if I had set this up already would not show. But if you did this on your own, you would see, and you would be confused. Do I need to grant this? Do I need to enable this? So that's why I'm trying to take the approach to the demo that I am today. And then let's see. So yeah, we're keeping everything else the same. Just double checking here. Bucket name looks good. Event type looks good. We're going to save this trigger. So it is loading. I did not allow access from the internet. I see the question in the chat. I did not allow access from the internet. Let's see. Okay, so the Eventarc API is still setting up. I wondered if this might happen. Actually, just give it a second. I'm going to just run through this again. If creation fails again because it's still setting up the Eventarc API, then we're going to go to the code and we'll run through the code together, and then we'll come back and create a trigger. Okay, all right. Looks like that worked that time. Sorry about that. Okay, so now we get to go to the code, and essentially this is a very simple function that it has here by default. But the way this works is you specify a function entry point, which is just a Python function whose name is placed here. And what happens is when the event triggering the function fires, the data about that event gets sent to the function that you specify as your entry point, right? So that's where we're going to pull the data about the file that we're then going to upload. So I have already written the code with the help of Claude, which is my favorite LLM to use for code writing, and we are going to. I'm just going to put it in here, and then we're going to talk about what's in the code. So the process CSV function is what we want to be our entry point. So I'm going to take that function name and I'm going to put it up here. And then I'll zoom in a bit so you guys can kind of see the comments explaining each line. We've got a couple of libraries here that we're importing. One is to actually handle the cloud functions. One is to interact with BigQuery programmatically. This is a decorator that marks this function as a cloud event handler. And then this is just, we only have one function, and it's just going to use that function and send the data to that function. We're grabbing the data from the cloud event, which is the argument for the function. So the local variable is cloud_event. We are grabbing the data, storing that in the variable data. And then we're going to grab the bucket name and the actual name of the file, store those in these variables. And then we're just as just as a simple check, we're checking to make sure that the data is a CSV file. If someone uploaded a Word doc or something like that, we would want to skip that in this case. That doesn't go in BigQuery. And then we're going to create a BigQuery client so that we can interact with BigQuery. This is the old project that I used. And what we're going to do here, so we've initialized the client. And what I need to do here is I need to get the project ID, which we created at the beginning of this demo, and the table ID. What was the table ID? Let's see. What did I call that? Sorry, the dataset ID. CSV ingestion demo. And we're going to call this users. We could call it users or customers or something like that, because that is what our data is, right? It's 1,000 users. And then this configures the actual job itself. And so what's going on here is we are specifying that the source file is CSV. That helps BigQuery to auto-detect the schema and to detect the header rows. We're telling it to skip the header row because that includes the column names. And we're asking it to automatically detect the schema from the CSV file, which like 90% of the time works just fine. But sometimes you want to specify the schema, right? So sometimes if you have a customer ID that's like all numeric, BigQuery might detect that as an integer, but you really want that to be a string, for example. So if we didn't do auto detect, we would have to specify that. And that's often just like a good practice in production pipelines anyway. And then this line here is telling BigQuery to append data to the table if it already exists, rather than overwriting the table if it already exists. This is building out the full path for the uploaded file. And then this is just starting the load job, right? Waiting until it's done, and then getting the table metadata, and then just printing that it all worked. All right. So another thing that we have to do here is we need to add these libraries to our requirements txt. So we saw in the previous file that we have functions framework and Google Cloud BigQuery. These are the two libraries that we use. And so we are going to try to build this now. And we are going to see if it works. So we're going to save and redeploy this. I'm like kind of scared that I messed something up live, but it is deploying, building and deploying. So it's using Cloud Build right now in order to build this. That's why we had to enable the Cloud Build. And actually, let's use this as a little bit of a teaching moment. If we go to Cloud Build, I think we will see the build information. Yep, here we go. So you can see that it's building, right? It has all the build steps and where it is in the build. This will probably show, that it's loading for all of them. And then because it's such a small build, it'll just show them all completed at once. But I am guessing that that's what's going to happen. And while it does that, what we need to think about is we need to think about the roles for our, see, check this out. So all these steps, each of these steps is being completed. All these are done. Now, so something we need to think about as well, in addition to the enabled APIs, is what roles our service account needs. And here we have our service account was given the editor role by default. And if you know anything about the principle of least privilege, which is often tested on GCP exams, giving a service account the editor role is kind of a bad practice. It's like giving the service account thousands and thousands of permissions that just doesn't need. So in an ideal world, what we would do here, and I think I am just going to do this real quick, again, as kind of a teaching moment, is I'm going to get rid of the editor role. I'm going to try to accomplish something closer to the principle of least privilege. So we know that it needs the Cloud Run invoker role. We know that it needs the BigQuery data editor role. The BigQuery data editor role allows the function to write data to BigQuery tables. And then the job user role actually runs the load job. So it needs that. And then it already has the Eventarc event receiver role. Yeah. Okay. So I think this is everything. I'm just looking at my notes. Yeah. Okay. So now this is much more secure than giving it the project level primitive role of editor, even though we still obviously don't want the account to be compromised. This is much better from a security standpoint. Okay, so now what should happen if we download this file and then we upload it, what should happen is this data should be ingested into it should be ingested into uh, BigQuery. So we're going to go to cloud storage. We're going to go to our buckets. This is the bucket that we just created. My heart is like beating fast. Let's see. So we're going to upload the file. And if we go back to the function, go to the logs, we should see it working. To process the file. And then the data should be in BigQuery in a second. Okay, looks like we got an error. Let's see. Oh, it needs storage access. So this is why, I mean, that wouldn't have happened if it just had the editor role. But so we go back to IAM. I think it needs storage admin. Yeah, let's just give it storage admin. Yeah. And then we're gonna, let's see, go back to the bucket. Let's delete this. Here we go. Okay. So, yeah, although like in my head, I'm kind of like, that was a little embarrassing that it like didn't work. I'm really trying to commit to this approach of like showing you how like actually doing these things in GCP often goes, like in the real world. Like I forgot that it needed access, the service account needed access to cloud storage, right? And so I looked at the logs, saw that there was an error, saw that there was a permissions error, and that's what taught me that I needed to add another role, another predefined role. And if I had just taken the editor, the role of the approach of adding the the primitive role of editor, which gives it just basically all ability to modify resources across the entire project, I wouldn't have run into that error, but then I would be giving up something in the way of security for the sake of convenience, right? And like the demo going more quote unquote smoothly, right? So if we see here, it's added the file, and if we go to BigQuery, yeah, we can see the data has loaded. So you can see the schema that it automatically detected. It's got the field names that were in the file. It's picked an integer for age, a float for lifetime value, because that makes sense. Sign up date, it automatically detects its date. Super convenient. And then everything else is a string, right? And so we could query this if we wanted to. If we just like, if I just select everything, which you really shouldn't do. You shouldn't do select star, but just for the sake of demonstration purposes, this is like a super small data set anyway. We can query, we can run analytics on this table. So, I've seen and helped clients at my old job with this kind of solution. It's pretty elegant. It uses all, serverless services. It's event based. And so, the cloud function is just ready to run and not charging you anything to just sit there and wait for data to be uploaded. Um, and so it's super cheap. And then you get your data in an environment like BigQuery, obviously, where you can actually start doing what you want with it using Cloud SQL or BigQuery ML rather than in CSV or in Google Sheets. So I hope that was helpful. I will now go back to the stream and see if you guys have any questions.